Okay. Oh, this is working? Yeah? Yeah. Oh, okay. On the way here, I have to tell you, I had mentioned to someone that I really hope Rabbi Taragin doesn't introduce me. I go to different yeshivos, and most of the times the guy that introduces me is very sweet and it's very nice, and he's usually someone younger than me, so it's okay. Like, I feel okay about it. Rabbi Taragin, obviously, no matter how long I learn for, no matter how hard I try, I will never come up to his ankles in Torah near Shemayim, and it's a little embarrassing, that he feels that. I understand he's being a gracious host, but I'm registering my macha, right now. I understand that you're learning Maseches Pesachim this year. I learned that about a few minutes ago, and I'm like, okay, there's a shir I want to give, and it has nothing to do with Pesachim. So how can I make it fit in with Maseches Pesachim? So let me tell you a Maisa Shahaya that happened about let's say 25 years ago. We were in my parents' home for Pesach, and obviously everything is kosher lePesach. My parents are religious people, and they're careful to clean for chametz and all of that. Rishus Rabbi Ryan, I didn't see that you were there. My brother was feeding our children. I think I only had one child at the time, and he had a couple of children at the time. I was feeding the little kids breakfast, and he was feeding them the Pesach cereal. You've seen Pesach cereals? They're disgusting, right? We keep one box from year to year just to remember not to buy new boxes of Pesach cereal every year because nobody eats it. So we just keep it around as a reminder. Don't put it on the list for this year, because essentially, what do they make Pesach cereal out of? My thing on Pesach is everything is just mashed potatoes. It's mashed potatoes with food coloring. It's It's all potato starch. So it's all just mashed. So like mashed potatoes in milk is kind of gross, right? So it's like the cereals are disgusting. So my brother's feeding the kids cereal. He's like, wow, this looks like really good Pesach cereal. And he looks at it was like some from brand, I don't know, Lieber's or whatever, some religious, very Pesach cereal sounding brand. And he looks at the ingredients, and it says cornstarch. And he says, cornstarch, that is Kitnius. He's like, maybe this was only for Sfardim, not for Ashkenazim. And then he keeps reading on the ingredients, and the next ingredient is wheat flour. He's like, well, wait just a second. That's actually chametz if it's wheat flour. And he realized that apparently, did you know that these? Oh, thank you. Did you know that these from brands make cereals throughout the year also? If you went to camp in the Catskills, you might know that, because some of the camps have those cereals that have the Hatzalah number on the back, and but there are kids in Camp Kaylee that swear that the From brand is better, Fruity Loopies is better than Fruit Loops or whatever, that the From brand is better than the other brand. But let me ask you a question. Let's say my brother or I were to have taken a bite of it, munching on the Pesach cereal, right? Let's say we would have done something like that. Are we chayiv anything? Is there any onesh? Any onesh? So kares if we did it b'meizid, chatas if we did it b'shogeg. Is that even a shogeg? Debatable, right? Meaning it could be that it's an ones, meaning we're assuming that everything in my parents' home is kosher. It looked like Pesach cereal. It's, my mother bought it from the Pesach aisle in the supermarket, which was under a very good hashgacha. Those signs that it says, please double check every label to make sure it's actually kosher lePesach. That's why they have those. I mean, not just from my mother's story, but, that's why they have those signs. So one could argue that if it's a situation of ones, so anos Rachmana Patre, right? And that even Lachamei of Esrim, you go up Lachamei of Esrim, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is balancing out your mitzvahs and your averos, so that wouldn't make the list. It wouldn't tip the scales. It would not be a problem. Fine, that's on one side. Now let's imagine something else. Imagine a case where I bought a box of matzos, that says shmura matzah, shmura mishas ktsira, and everything is kosher with 1,000,000 chassidish hashkachas on it, and everything's great. And unbeknownst to me, someone before Pesach consolidated different boxes of matzahs with one another. They just saw this box was not totally full. There was another box that was kind of empty. The other box happened to be matzah. It's kosher Pesach, but it's not shmura. It was not shmura. And they put some matzahs in my shmura box. This would be easier to imagine if you're talking about machine matzahs, because machine matzahs, hand matzahs are always shmura, as far as I know. Machine matzahs sometimes aren't shmura, sometimes they're kosher Pesach, but they're not shmura, certainly not shmura mishas ktsira, right? So imagine now I have a mix of matzahs, and I think it's all the shmura matzah because it's in the shmura matzah box. I had no idea that someone came and switched up the boxes, and on the night of the Seder, I eat a kazayis of matzah, unbeknownst to me, that is not shmura. Was I mekayim the mitzvah of matzah? In reality, when they're putting my mitzvos on a scale. What? Seemingly no, why not?
You didn't eat matzah.
I didn't eat matzah. Whatever I ate wasn't kosher for matzah. So you would assume that even though we have such a concept called anus, rachmana patre, that when there's an onus, the Torah says you're pater from any onus, you didn't do an aveira, but we don't have onus, commanda ovid mitzvah, that a situation that was beyond your control. It says if you did the mitzvah, maybe you're not going to be punished for it. Maybe you're not even going to be punished for a bittul mitzvah, but you're certainly not going to get schar for kiyuma mitzvah. So keep that on the side for a moment. Let me share with you a shaila that came up not that long ago. In fact, it came up right before Sukkot. A Talmud of mine who is a resident, medical resident, so he's doing his residency and he has a very grueling schedule, as I'm sure there are people in the room that aspire to be a doctor one day. So good luck. It's really hard. There's a lot of, it's great mitzvah. You'll help a lot of Jews and it will be a great thing for Klal Yisrael. We need a lot of doctors. It happens to be that we find that the trend in America and truth is, even worse in Israel, is that a lot of young Jewish people are not so interested in going into medicine because of the massive investment of time and effort that it takes to become a doctor, and also how minimal an investment of time and effort it takes to get involved in nursing homes or whatever, or a small business, or selling things on Amazon and making a quick buck here and there. And it seems that everybody's making it that way. Everybody's not making it that way, but it seems that everybody's making it that way, and people assume that there are shortcuts to make money. So so it's great to be a doctor. We need doctors. Good. This guy is a medical resident, but there are very hard choices that he has to make as a result of that. So he's looking at a schedule right before Sukkot for the coming weeks, and he realizes that as of now, he's scheduled to be in the hospital both of the first 2 days of Sukkot, including the first night of Sukkot. And but he realizes that he has a slot that's a very coveted slot that he's able to take from someone else and trade back those 2 days of Sukkot. What he could do is, right now he's not scheduled to be in the hospital on a particular Friday afternoon. Now that Friday afternoon, the shift is from 12 o'clock noon until 10 p.m. at night. So he can easily trade out of his Sukkot slot and get 12 to 10 on Friday as his slot. So he wants to know, is he chayiv to do that? Is it mutter to do that? Is it asur to do that? Why would he be, what's the cheshbon over here? So he said, first of all, my family very much wants me home for Sukkot. They would much rather me be home for Sukkot than to be home for one more Friday night Su'udah. Second of all, he said, the chances that I will be yotze the mitzvah of sukkah on the first night of Sukkot are 0 if I'm in the hospital. There's no sukkah there. I certainly can't leave for a long enough time to be able to go out and make kiddush and have a kazayas in the sukkah that's nearby. I will not be yotze the mitzvah of sukkah. The chances of being yotze the mitzvah of daled minim on the first day of Sukkot, which even outside of Yerushalayim is daraisa on the first day, chance of being yotze that mitzvah are not 0, but not great either. So if I keep the Sukkot thing, my family will be angry at me. I'm going to miss out on the mitzvah of Sukkah, and I'm going to miss out on the mitzvah of daled minim. On the other hand, if I go the other direction, I take off on Sukkot, when am I going to be working? I'm going to be working on Shabbos. And working on Shabbos involves serious Chilul Shabbos, meaning and Chilul Shabbos is worse than Chilul Yantiv. right? So that's his cheshbon. So what do? Am I allowed to switch to be Mechal Shabbos instead of being Mechal Yantiv? Am I obligated to, so that way I'll be able to be Mekayim more mitzvahs d'oraisa? Or is it, it's hard to judge, so whichever is whichever. You do whichever you can. So I was very intrigued by that shaila, because I always find it fascinating when you have shailas that involve real life situations where a difficult choice must be made. Meaning, in the world of the Beis Medrash, it's very easy to look at the world through rose-colored glasses. That everything's always going to be a mitzvah, bihidura. Everything's always going to be the way it's the best way to do the mitzvah and everything. But in real life, there are always going to be situations that come up where some sacrifice is going to have to be made. And choosing which sacrifice or what to sacrifice, that very often is something we need to be educated on, and we need to be able to figure out. What's true in halacha is true in hashkafa as well. And I started doing a shir about, I don't know if I can even call it a shir, a WhatsApp group about a year ago for Refuah Shalema for Jonathan Cohen. He should have a Refuah Shalema b'soch Shar Cholei Yisrael. And the idea, the chap that he came up with, was that he's going to collect 10 questions that are randomly submitted by people. Anyone on that WhatsApp group here? Yeah. So he collects 10, no problem if you're not, it's fine. He's going to collect, so every week he collects 10 questions, interesting questions that people submit, and he sends them to me, and I record whatever answers I can come up with in that short amount of time. So one of the questions that someone asked is, why is it that we aren't all, super Haredi, Hasidish, whatever? Meaning, doesn't God want a pure and pristine avodas Hashem, and not an avodas Hashem that's watered down with engagement with secular society or the real world, so to speak? And I said, well, what would give you that impression? Meaning, if God made a world that's full of choices and full of difficult choices, if God made a Torah that's full of choices, asay, docha, los asay. Why didn't he just make the Torah where the asay never conflicts with the los asay, and then you won't need asay, docha, los asay? Meaning, he built a Torah of complexity. He built a world of complexity. Maybe part of the avoda is to be able to figure out how to function within that world, al taras hakodesh, and to engage that complexity. Perhaps, I don't know, but maybe that's part of the avoda. So I always find it intriguing, not only on a hashkafic level, but on a halachic level, when you have to make these choices. So I was thinking about this choice. How would you measure Sukkot versus Shabbos? Right? What would you say? Any ideas over here of why one over the other?
Well, Shabbos, if you're over it, it's Misa, and then Sukkot, it's only, I believe it's Kares?
Not even. Yom Kippur would be Kares. Yom Tov is a lav. Very good. Right? When a person is in violation of Chil Shabbos, let's say with Eidim and Asra, and he does Chil Shabbos b'mezid, so a person is going to be Chayiv Misas Bezdin, he's Chayiv Skila. A person is Mechalel Yom Tov with Eidim and Asra, he's Chayiv Malkus. It's a violation of a Lo Saseh. Happens to be for Yom Kippur, it's Kares. So Yom Kippur is somewhere in between. But a Lo Saseh, regular Lo Saseh, is not nearly as severe as Chiyuv Misa. And who cares how severe an Aveira is? Well, that comes up a lot of times in halacha as well. I'll give you a very simple example. The halacha is that you're not supposed to bury a tzaddik etzel rasha or a rasha etzel tzaddik. You're not supposed to bury. The Mishnah Sanhedrin says that the Sanhedrin used to have different batei kavaros for different haruge bezdin, and the people that were chayiv skila and sreifa were buried in a different cemetery than the people that were chayiv hereg and chenek, because hereg and chenek is not as severe as skila and sreifa. Not fair to the hereg and chenek people to have to be buried next to the skila and sreifa people. I know a rabbi in Germany who texted me this morning, and he told me that there was a big scandal that one of the leaders of the BDS movement in whatever country it was, I don't think it was in Germany, I think it was one of the other European countries, is a Jewish guy, and he died, and without asking permission from the Jewish community, they buried him in the Jewish cemetery. And the community's up in arms that you bury this guy together with my father, my mother, with my family members, this guy who did everything he can to fight the strength of the Medina and the ability of our Medina to defend itself and to thrive. How dare you bury him? So the rabbi asked me, a friend of mine who's a rabbi in Germany, asked me, is there any basis to keep him out of the Jewish cemetery? And the answer is, Yes, there is absolutely basis to keep him out of the Jewish cemetery because you're not supposed to bury a Rasha next to a tzaddik. A person is, he didn't earn the right. Rav Shatz always tells us that that's why sometimes you go through the cemetery and you'll see that there are shuls that own sections of the cemetery. You'll see, like I remember when in one of the cemeteries where my wife's grandparents are, they're buried, I think, in the section of the Young Israel Forest Hills. Like there's a whole section for the Young Israel Forest Hills and a whole section for this shul or that shul. So Rav Shatz said, what does being in shul together have anything to do with where you're buried? Why do shuls get together and by sections? So he said the assumption is people davening in the same shul are usually roughly around the same religious level, right? And based on that, we can't measure everyone's tzitzis. There's no other way to figure out exact religious levels. So broadly speaking, people in the same shul are on the same. I have two guys from my shul sitting right in front of me. Halavai, I should be on your religious level, but we assume that people from the same shul are usually roughly on the same religious level. Okay, fine. So on the one hand, you would say Shabbos is much more chomer. You cannot violate Shabbos. Counterpoint. Give me an argument.
You also need to know how the student's mind works, and if he's going to be stressed out when he's working during one thought as opposed to the other about what he's being forced to do, and
it would require a great deal of stress to assume that it's compromising the level of care for the patient. Okay, I understand, but it would require like a great deal of stress. Yeah.
Also, if a hospital scheduled him for Sukkot, then maybe it could be considered an ones. And if he were to switch to Shabbos, it would be mizi.
Meaning if he were to choose Shabbos, then he's choosing Shabbos. The hospital chose Sukkot for him. So whatever mitzvahs he doesn't do and whatever chilul he does is ba'ones.
Would he be considered violating Shabbos if it's pikuach nefesh?
Is it even chilul Shabbos or chilul yantif if it's pikuach nefesh? Meaning is pikuach nefesh hutra or dechuya, right? The Shulchan Aruch paskins that were mechal Shabbos al yidei gedolei Yisrael. Doesn't mean that like you quickly call up Rav Asher Weiss and say I need a quick chilul Shabbos over here. It means that that people who are over bar mitzvah, who are Jews, meaning we try to make sure, but it doesn't matter who. Everyone, we don't look for Namir L'Nachri. We don't look for. The Ramah says we do look for, meaning if it's not going to compromise the standard of care, the Ramah paskins that we actually should look for the lesser Isser. And when it comes to Shabbos, if you could do just as easily a Shnaim Shasu'ah or a Kila Achar Yad, a woman is in the hospital, she just gave birth, and she needs to call the nurse, so they have a button next to the hospital bed. So we tell her hit it with your knuckle instead of with your finger. You might as well. It's an easy enough thing. It's an easy enough shinui, and that will knock it down to a drabanan. Yeah, another factor.
Well, you said this slot is from 12 to 10 versus both of the first days.
Very good.
6 hours of Shabbos versus 48 hours.
Excellent. 6 hours of Shabbos versus 48 hours of Sukkot. Where does that come into the cheshbon? Additionally, on Shabbos you're not going to be missing out on mitzvos. You'll be violating Yisurim. On Sukkot, you're going to be missing out on big mitzvos that only come once a year. You're going to be missing out on Sukkah, the first night of Sukkot, which is particularly important. Even if it's raining, we're nohig to go into the Sukkah and eat a kazayis of bread in the Sukkah on the first night. So you're going to be missing out on big mitzvos. So I thought this was a fascinating shayla on two levels. First of all, to assess whether there's such a thing as an ones in failing to do a mitzvah, that you failed to do a mitzvah, but not through your own fault, only because of ones. Is that considered to be a kiyum mitzvah? Or do we just say, no, you don't get credit for a mitzvah. Maybe we're not going to fault you for a bittul mitzvah. Or maybe it is a kiyum mitzvah. So that's topic number one. Topic number two is, how do you assess 6 hours of Shabbos versus 48 hours of Yantif? How do you assess, even though Shabbos is a more severe Aveira, how do you assess a smaller amount of a more severe Aveira versus a lesser amount of versus a greater amount of a less severe Aveira, right? So I think those are both Shas topics. Those are both like much larger topics that can come up in any area of halacha, and I find them both fascinating. So what's our time slot? How much time we got? All right, we'll figure it out. But let's try to assess it. Let's try to take one area at a time. So let's start with ones. Ones on a kiyum mitzvah. Ma'aser shaya kachaya. 2 weeks ago, a guy comes over to me in shul, and I'm not going to say a name because he might be embarrassed by it, even though it's not his fault. He came over to me in shul, and he had just had his tefillin checked by a sofer that I recommend in the neighborhood, and he told me that the sofer told him that his tefillin are pasul, and the sofer said, you might want to put on tefillin again today. Meaning it was the middle of the afternoon. He said, you might want to put on, and hearing that was really jarring to him. You might want to put on tefillin again today. That means I wasn't yosem mitzvah tefillin this morning, or yesterday morning, or the morning before. Meaning, depending on what kind of psul. I had a case a number of years ago in my shul. A guy was 30 years old. Now that guy is 50, so it was a long time ago. But when he was 30 years old, he had his tefillin checked. It was missing a letter. Not like that it was scratched out or whatever. Missing a letter that was never there. I said, how do you never get your tefillin checked before? He said, I get them checked every 2 years. I'm makbid to get them checked every 2 years. I go to a sofer that someone else recommended and get them checked every 2 years. A sofer who I later found out is a very nice fellow, very sweet guy, knowledgeable as well, but he doesn't have such great concentration. It's a bad thing when you're a sofer, right? So he missed the fact that this guy was missing a letter in his tefillin, which means at the age of 30, he looks at me and he says, was I never ever yotzei the mitzvah of tefillin in my life? Now, this is definitely not a shogeg. It's not amazing. It's not a shogeg. This is an onus. He bought tefillin that from reputable, or he didn't buy it. So his parents bought his tefillin. He had the right to trust his parents that they were buying a reasonable pair of tefillin. They were very nice from people. He had them checked by a sofer that was recommended by a rabbi, right? So he did everything right. And he had them checked frequently, which, by the way, you don't need to check them that frequently. Every 2 years is a little much. He had them checked frequently. And yet, at the age of 30, is there any svara to say that, don't worry, you were mekayim the mitzvah every day of your life? So there is a tshuva in the Rav Pa'alim, Chelik Dalid or Chaim Siman Beis, where the Rav Pa'alim, he starts with a little bit of a poem in, only Svardim can do that. They write the whole tshuva is in poetry. It's like the whole thing rhymes. It's like unbelievable. So he writes, Va'na avda Allah alibi lachkar ala niyanim elo chiyetzim bedavar shu pasal midina, vayishogin bo rabim mikademes dina. Im nomer chas v'shalom lo ala biyada mitzvah kitikna ukehilchas akashar nitna. L'moshe raya mehemna u'masul le'edo ne'emana. Im kein chas v'shalom mehem techzarna mitzvah gedola ve'elyona. Okay, it helps that everything ends with a nut, but still, he has a whole, and the paragraph goes on, a whole poem that chas v'sholom, we're going to say that this person is missing an entire mitzvah. So he tries to bring four rayas that you are mekayim a mitzvah, an unbelievable chiddush, that you're mekayim a mitzvah if you didn't do the mitzvah ba'ones. Raya number one, let's see if you think any of these rayas are convincing. Raya number one, Gemara in Horios Tafilon Beis, Gedola Avera L'Shma. That when a person has to do an Avera L'Shma, he gets schar of a mitzvah. Well, schar of a mitzvah, he didn't even do a mitzvah. He did an Avera, but it was an Avera L'Shma. What's the example of Avera L'Shma? What? Writing down the Mishnah was Hora'asha that had to be right. It's an issur of writing down Torah Shebal Peh. So he gets schar of a mitzvah of writing down Torah Shebal Peh. The example the Gemara gives, Ya'al Eishes Chever Akeni, that she solicited or whatever, I don't know, seduced, and but the whole point was that it was Lishma. And you see that even though it was an Avera, it was a Maisa Avera, they still got credit for a mitzvah. However, he brings a Raya Lahepech. He says, there is a Gemara in Maseches, a Mishnah in the second parak of Maseches Sukkah, where the Mishnah says that they told Rabbi Yochanan ben Acharani, Im Kena Yisanoig lo kiyamta mitzvah sukkah miyamecha, that he was sitting in a sukkah that was 6 tvachim by 6 tvachim, and not a sukkah that was 7 tvachim by 7 tvachim. There's a Gzeir Rabbanan, Shemi Yimashech Achar Shulchano, that you might end up where your table is, and if you don't leave enough room in your sukkah for your table, that's problematic. So he said, if you did that, you were never mekayim the mitzvah of sukkah miyamecha. So Tosfos writes, it means that he was not even mekayim the mitzvah da'oraisa of sukkah. So even though it was only a takana d'rabbanan, he was not mekayim the gzeira d'rabbanan, he was not mekayim the mitzvah da'oraisa. So says the Rav Pa'alim, apparently even though his kavanah was lishma, he meant to do the mitzvah, he tried to do the mitzvah, he did something that resembled the mitzvah, he even did something that on a d'oraisa level is the mitzvah, and nevertheless, lo kiyamta mitzvah sukkah miyamecha. you're not Mekayim the mitzvah of Sukkah at all. So apparently good intentions is not good enough. So the Rav Pa'alim says, no. The Gemara only meant that you're not Mekayim the mitzvah, the midarabanan. But midaraisa, of course, he was Mekayim the mitzvah. On a daraisa level, good intentions are good enough. So that's not a raya lahepich. So that's what the Rav Pa'alim says. So raya number one again that he has is Gedola Avera Lishma. So is that a raya? Is that a good raya? A bad raya? L'chor, it's got nothing to do with anything. Right? Gedola Avera Lishma means that sometimes the best thing to do in very rare circumstances is the Avera. And that becomes the best thing to do. Does that mean you get a kiyum mitzvah of a particular mitzvah? Certainly not. Meaning, you're not going to say that if a guy wears tefillin, that apostle of tefillin, he's mekayim the mitzvah of tefillin. Maybe he'll say he's mekayim the mitzvah of trying to wake up early every single day to daven HaKadosh Baruch Hu and to try to do the mitzvah of tefillin and to have good intentions or whatever. So you would call that, we say Gedola Avera L'Shma. We do not say that you're mekayim a particular mitzvah, that because you did an Avera, it's a kiyum of a mitzvah of sukkah or a mitzvah of tefillin or a mitzvah of anything else. So raya number one is not particularly convincing. Another raya is quoted by Rav Yosef in Yabia Omer, Chelik Zayin or Chaim Simen Hey, where he quotes a Das Kedoshim in Simen Lamates, that tefillin that were found to be possible, that were found to be chaser. He says the Gemara in Kiddushin, Samach Vav and Beis, talks about a Kohen who did the avoda, and then he finds out afterwards that he was a chalal, that he wasn't really a Kohen. His father was a Kohen, he's not a Kohen. How could that be that his father's a Kohen, he's not a Kohen? The father married a Grusha, the father married a Zona, the father married a Giores, right? It could be any number of people that the father married, and that renders the son a Chalal. The story I've been telling a lot because I just heard it from Rabbi Danny Rapp a couple of weeks ago. He said that he had a Chavrusa in high school who was an answer to a great trivia question. How do you have two brothers, one of them both with the same mother, same father, not half brothers, full brothers, one of them is a Kohen and the other one's not? A Kohen marries a regular, normal, good woman and they have a child together. That child is a Kohen. They then get divorced. They then remarry one another and they have another child. Right? They're not allowed to remarry one another. That's why before a Kohen gives a get, it's a very big deal. We got to make sure that he's sure about it, because sometimes couples do try to get back together, and that's not a possibility when it comes to a Kohen. So they have another child. So Rabbi Rapp said that his chavrusa in 12th grade was that second child. Right? He said his 12th grade Rabbi came into Shir on the first day. They were learning Makos, and he said, "Does anyone know what a Ben Grusha?" Rabbi Fine was the Rabbi. He says, "Does anyone know what a Ben Grusha or Ben Chalutza is?" So the kid's like, "Oh yeah, I know, Ben Grusha, that's me." so the Rabbi Fine said, "Stop it." He's teaching him. So he's like, "Stop it, you don't know what you're talking about." He goes, "You don't know what you're talking about, Rabbi. I am a Ben Grusha." And he in fact was a Ben Grusha. Rabbi Rapp pointed out, it leads to an interesting shaila. When that Kohen got married, so he is, let's say, Reuven ben Yaakov. Yaakov is a Kohen, Reuven's not. So do you write Reuven ben Yaakov HaKohen? Meaning does the HaKohen go on the father, or does the HaKohen go on the child? Or is there some sort of indicator that you have to make? Reuven HaChalal ben Yaakov HaKohen. I once met a fine young Talmud Chacham whose last name was Katz, and I said, "Oh, Katz, you must be a Kohen." He said, "Nope, I'm a Chalal." I said, "Okay, I didn't mean to embarrass." He said, "It's not embarrassing. My grandfather wasn't religious. He didn't know. He married a Grusha. They had my father. My father became a Baal Tshuva, and here I am." And he said that Rabbi Rapp used to refer to him in yeshiva as a walking minchas chinuch. Minchas chinuch always talks about cases of halalim. Okay, fine. So you have a guy who does the avodah, and then he finds out he's a chalal. Avodah kshera. The avodah is kosher. How could the avodah be kosher? You weren't working with the proper, with the proper things that you need for the mitzvah. Elamai, you tried. It was noticed. It wasn't your fault. You didn't know. You had no idea you were a chalal. Avodah kshera. So the poskim reject that raya as well, because that very same Gemara says that if a person was a Baal Mum and he did the avodah, not knowing that he was a Baal Mum, the avodah is pasul, meaning it's a specific zeres hakasuv that you have about a chalal, that b'diavad avodah of a chalal is kosher. You don't have that specific zeres hakasuv by tefillin that are pasul. You don't have that specific zeres hakasuv by anything else. So raya number 2 doesn't seem to be all that great. Raya number 3 The Tshuvas Pri Asada brings from a halacha that we know about, that if you're, let's say, learning from the Torah, and you find a mistake in the Torah as you're learning, right, which happens from time to time, that you find a mistake. The typical Sefer Torah, when they computer check it, you'd be astonished at how many mistakes they typically find with the first computer checking. It's hard to imagine how prior to computer checking any Sefer Torah was ever kosher. I mean, it's so many letters. It takes so much concentration. It's so prone to mistakes. So it could be that nowadays they know they could rely on the computer check. So, we're not as careful when we write them. And that's why we find more, it's a chicken and the egg kind of thing. But be that as it may, you're learning from Torah, you find a mistake in the Sefer Torah. You're in the middle of Shishi of that week's Parsha. Parsha's Naso, let's say. Right? So what do you do?
The owner of the Torah present. Because if the owner of the Torah is present, then what?
You yell at him and you embarrass him.
You don't embarrass him. Does it not? Don't you continue, finish reading the Torah, and then maybe you go do it later? Because you don't have a chiyuv to hear the Torah. It's a chiyuv on the shul to have it read.
Okay. I don't think it makes a difference if the owner of the Torah is present. What do we do? You finish. You finish
with a different Torah.
You finish with a different Torah. Do you go back with the new Torah? Meaning you put away the Torah if there's a problem, right? Do you go back and put it, and do you go back with the new Torah? You don't. Apparently, you yotze the Kriyas Torah to that point. So they bring a raya that apparently you say the Kriyas Torah to that point. Apparently, without a kasher chefza shel mitzvah, but you had no idea that it wasn't a kasher chefza shel mitzvah. You yotze the mitzvah. So if you put on tefillin your whole life and they were missing a letter, you yotze the mitzvah because even though they were apostle, you yotze the mitzvah anyhow. Right? That would that's what would emerge. So Rav Yosef and Yabia Omer, that same tshuva in Yabia Omer says, come on, that's not a good raya either, because everyone knows the Tshuvas Harambam in Pe'er Hadar Simin Tes, where the Rambam writes. And by the way, the Tshuvas Pe'er Hadar was put out in a beautiful new edition, probably about 25 years ago, by Rav David Yosef, the current Sephardic chief rabbi. And there's an interesting introduction there from Rav Avadia. And he explains why the Pe'er Hadar is so important. And he says that not all that the Beis Yosef didn't have all of the Rambam's tshuvas when he wrote the Shulchan Aruch, but we know that the Beis Yosef generally tried to follow the Rambam, or at least the majority between the Rambam, the Rif, and the Rosh, which usually means the Rambam. And if there's something in Pe'er Hadar where he goes against that which Maran Beit Yosef says, even though Rav Vadia says, I made a living on being on saying that we always have to follow Maran Beit Yosef, and that's what it's all about. Rav Vadia tried to get all of Sephardic Jewry on the same page, that everyone should agree to Maran Beit Yosef, Maran Beit Yosef. The Moroccans weren't having it, and a lot of others that had other Sephardim that had their own traditions, that to not always, that follow the Ben Ish Chai or others, we're not so excited about this, but this was Rav Vadia's big milchama to always follow Maran Beit Yosef. So even so, says Rav Vadia, if you know Maran Beit Yosef would have said something else, had he only seen the tshuva in the Pe'er Hadar, then you go like the Pe'er Hadar and not like Maran Beit Yosef. Fascinating introduction that he has. That we don't assume that it's the hand of Hashkacha that wrote the Shulchan Aruch. We assume that it was the hand of Rav Yosef Cairo that wrote the Shulchan Aruch, and therefore you can retroactively assume that had he known, certain things would have changed. Fascinating. But anyway, in the Pe'er Hadar, the Rambam says you yotze Kriyas Torah without a kasher Torah. The mitzvah of Ksivas Sefer Torah requires that the Torah be kasher. The mitzvah of Kriyas Torah does not require that the Torah be kasher. In fact, there are many places in the Mishnah Brura where the Mishnah Brura doesn't just explain the halacha, but he starts off with an introduction to that section of halacha. So in Hilchos Mistakes of Kriyas HaTorah, the Mishnah Brura starts with a little introductory paragraph. And the introductory paragraph is, we always keep the Rambam in the back of our minds. Meaning whatever we do b'diavad is based on the Rambam. And it's based on the Rambam, this Shitas HaRambam, that you don't need a kosher Sefer Torah. So what raya was that? Number 3 is l'chora, not a great raya. A fourth raya is an interesting raya that's quoted from Rav Gedalia Felder, the author of the Sefer Yesod Yeshurun. He points out that the Gemara Masechah Shabbos Daf Mem Tes says that a person should keep a guf naki when they're wearing tefillin, Elisha bal kanafayim. And it says, who is Elisha bal kanafayim? And it tells this fantastic story about someone who earned the title, the name Elisha bal kanafayim, because he had a miraculous salvation. He was wearing tefillin at a time where there was a gzeira that Jews were not allowed to wear tefillin, and the authorities were after him, and he ran and ran and ran, and he finally ran into an alleyway somewhere, and he quickly took his tefillin off his head and he held it in his hand, and the authorities caught up with him and they said, Maze biyodecha, what's in your hand? And he had to think fast. He said, Kanfeyona. I don't know why you would say that, right? But he said, Kanfeyona. And they said, yeah, let's see. And like Penn and Teller, like a magician, he opens up his hands and a dove flies away. I don't know how he ever got his tefillin back, but his life was saved, right? So he was zoche to such a miracle. He was Elisha bal kanafayim. So Tosas over there says that Hadar, meaning Parakama de Rosh Hashanah, Poshe Yisrael begufan karkafta de lo manach tefillin, that which the Gemara says in Rosh Hashanah, that who is a Poshe Yisrael begufan, who is someone who's considered a Posheya in their guf, it's a head that never had tefillin on it, a skull that doesn't have tefillin on it. Om Rabbeinu Tam de Mayri Ba'osan Shosan Machmas Mered Umevazin HaMitzvos V'sochkin B'ritzua Shaviyadim B'rosham, that this is talking about someone who rebelliously does not put on tefillin. But if someone does not rebelliously not put on tefillin, he is not Poshe Yisrael B'gufan. Says Rabbi Gedalia Felder, you see from here that apparently you get credit for the mitzvah of tefillin if it's not rebellious, if it's not your fault. Good raya, bad raya? I don't understand this right at all. Meaning, all it tells you is that you're not Poshe Yisrael B'gufan. It does not say that you're Mekayim a mitzvah. What does that have to do with anything? So that's very difficult to understand. Now, but for sure, the guy doesn't need kapara. L'chora, the guy shouldn't need kapara because it wasn't his fault at all. Who does need kapara, by the way? The sofer, right? That for sure. The sofer definitely needs kapara. Then Rav C. Pesach Frank in Shuvas Hartzvicha Galsim Lamnei brings a couple of rayas that you're not mekayim the mitzvah of tefillin, when even though it wasn't your fault. The Gemara Baba Kama Daf Tezayin says that Yirmiyahu Hanavi Davin Takarish Baruch Hu, that the Rishaim who give tzedakah should run into people who are not deserving of tzedakah, and they should be fooled by those people and end up giving their tzedakah to such people. Why? Because then they won't be Mekayim the mitzvah of tzedakah. But what do you mean? They thought the guy was poor. They thought they were helping out. Yeah, but apparently, even if you thought and you tried and you're doing your best, but if it ended up in the wrong hands, you're not Mekayim the mitzvah of tzedakah. So isn't that a clear raya that you do with the best of intentions, you're still not Mekayim the mitzvah? The Gemara in Sukkot of Chavches, the Mishnah, if it rains on the first night of Sukkot, mashal ma davardoma, anyone know the mashal?
Water.
The Eved, right? The Eved tries to serve his master. The master pours the water in his face. What do you mean pours the water in his face? That sounds like it's a bizayon and you're not mekayim anything. Well, why don't you just say it's not like the master's pouring the water in his face? It's like the master's saying, "Don't worry, I got this one. You're good." Right? I mean, you could stay inside the house. You'll still get a kiyum mitzvah. Elamai, he doesn't get a kiyum mitzvah. So these are the C. Pesach Frank's two rayas. So Rav Asher Weiss in Shuvas Minchas Asher Chelik Beis Simin Zayin says, well, one has to distinguish. He says, between the mitzvah be'al mechaber and mitzvah be'al makom. I just had the privilege of spending some time with Rav Asher Weiss yesterday, and he was mentioning how he had just gotten a call from Kol HaLashon, the people in Kol HaLashon, that it's like it's a sheer platform, right? And they told him how many downloads of his shiurim or listens of his shiurim there were. It was something like 600,000, 700,000, some crazy number. And he's like, can you imagine? Like, it's unbelievable. He said, in Torah, anytime, it's like unbelievable. And I said, I was with Rav Shai Shechter, and he looks at Shai, he goes, you probably have more. So, I said, Rabbi, you're missing, you're missing the real point over here, that your Torah is not so much about how many of your shiurim people listen to. You can't give a halacha shir nowadays anymore. You will not hear a halacha shir in the year 2025, in the year Tafshin Pei Vav, that doesn't quote Rav Asher Weiss. I mean, you can't deal with anything in halacha anymore unless you don't have a halacha shir that doesn't deal with what Rav Moshe Feinstein had to say about it. If he spoke about the topic, and he spoke about every topic up to his time, no serious Talmud Chacham can give a halacha share without at least arguing or agreeing, but without at least dealing with Rav Asher Weiss's take on the topic. That's the real Harbatzas Torah. That's the. So I think he enjoyed that. I think that was okay. So Rav Asher Weiss in a tshuva says, look, there's a big difference between mitzvah ben l'chaver and mitzvah ben l'makom. When it comes to mitzvah ben adam l'chavero, you can't say ki'ilu asa. That you did the best of intentions. It's as if you did it, like tzedakah. Tzedakah, I gave the money. It just ended up in a rich guy's hands, not in a poor guy's hands. It ended up in the hands of someone who's a charlatan and a thief and whatever, instead of the hands of a needy poor person. Well, then it's not tzedakah, because the purpose of tzedakah is to actually provide somebody who needs it with something. The purpose of mitzvah l'makom is not to provide a Kodesh Baruch Hu with anything. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when it comes to HaKadosh Baruch Hu perspective, well, Rav Asher thinks that even on a mitzvah saseh, if it turns out that it was an onus, you were not able to do the mitzvah, you get a kiyum mitzvah. And in fact, it's really Mefurish a Gemara, right? The Gemara says that in a number of places, Amr Blazer, Chashav Adam Lasos Mitzvah V'nenas V'lo Asa'a, Mala Lav HaKasav Ki'ilu Asa'a. That it's as if you did the mitzvah. So now let's go back to this guy on this resident. First night of Sukkot, he's missing Sukkah. First day of Sukkot, maybe he's missing Daled Minim. Is that a loss? Is he Mekayim the mitzvah? According to Rav Asher Weiss, L'cha'ora, mitzvah b'nam l'makom, he's Mekayim the mitzvah. So it wouldn't necessarily be a loss on that level, perhaps. Now let's quickly discuss the other point. How do you measure 6 hours of Shabbos versus 48 hours of Yantiv? Shabbos is much more severe, but Yantiv is much more in terms of the hours that you're going to be working. So this is a topic that's discussed in a number of contexts. I'll start with once we're on the topic of tzedakah. The Gemara in Bab Basra Daf Tes tells us that kol pruta mitztarefes l'cheshbon gadol. That every pruta of tzedakah that you give is mitztaref to a big cheshbon of how much you gave. Is that not the most obvious statement you've ever heard? No, obviously, meaning if you're doing your taxes at the end of the year and you have a line for how much charity you gave, you add it all together. I gave $180 here, $18 there, whatever, always in high multiples, right? I gave this much there, that much, right? And then you add it all together. Of course, it's Mitzvah for Cheshbon Gadol. Says the Maharal in the Chidushei Agados that normally giving lots of small amounts is not as good as giving one large amount, because it's very easy to give small amounts. It doesn't take much discipline to give $1 to the mashulach that comes to shul. But it's harder to part with a lot of money at a time. The special bracha of tzedakah is that Hashem will count it as if you gave the large amount. That specifically by tzedakah, Hashem will count it as if you gave all of that at once. Mashmos is giving all of it, not just mashmos, the Maharal is explicit. Giving all of it at once would be a greater mitzvah. Wait, one time, big amount versus lots of times, small amount. Says Maharal, one time, big amount should have been a greater mitzvah. Elamai, by tzedakah, there's a special bracha that Hashem counts even the small amounts so that they add up together. So when it comes to other mitzvahs, quantity versus quality, large amount versus quality, sounds like quality is going to win. That's what the Maharal implies. However, there's a famous Rambam. The Rambam in Perish HaMishnayos and Pirkei Avos Perek Gimel Mishnah Tes Vav talks about how it's better to give, if you have $100 to give, better to give $1 100 times than to give $100 once. Why?
You build a giving personality.
Exactly. You build a giving personality, you build your giving muscle. A lot of times guys will ask me, they're newly married and they're not making any money, they're in graduate school, they're learning in smicha, whatever, they're getting supported by their parents or whatever else. Do I give meiser? Do I have to give meiser? What's the answer? Probably not. Meiser is a minhag that we only do if we could afford it, and you can't afford anything if you're being supported by other people. But I always tell them, sit down with your parents, have a conversation, and ask them if you could at least give some amount to tzedakah every month. Because you never want to fall out of the habit of giving. It's a muscle that will atrophy like that. And then one day you're going to make a lot of money and you're still not going to give. So you want to keep the giving going. You want to keep that exercise going. Says the Rambam, the best way to work out that giving muscle is by doing it a lot. Low weight, maximum reps for those who work out, right? I mean, that's what the Rambam recommends. That giving a lot. That's what the Rambam says. The Bach in Siman Tafresh Sadihei says, no. I agree with the Rambam, but for a different reason. He says, Matanos Lavyonim requires giving a drop to two different people. Mishloach Manos involves giving more to one person. And he says, Haseichel nosein shemi sheyesh lo mea dinarim gadol scharo im yechalkan l'mea aniyim. That it's logical that if you divide $100 to 100 aniyim, you get greater schar than if you give $100 to one ani. Why, says the Bach? Because you're being mechaya nefashos rabos. You're taking care of so many more people. Meaning it's not about my giving muscle, it's about impacting him and him and him and him and him, as opposed to impacting one person. L'may nafkamina between the Rambam and the Bach. What would nafkamina be? So one nafkamina might be, what if I give the same money 100 separate times? Like, I have a $100 bill and I also have a pile of hundreds. A pile of singles with 100 singles. And the ani's like, so I'm like, you know what? Put the $100 bill in my pocket, give him one, another. According to the Rambam, I'll tear my rotator cuff doing that, right? Meaning like that giving muscle is very well exercised. According to the Bach, no good. I didn't spread the wealth, right? Another nafkamina might be daily giving. Anyone know about daily giving? You know what the platform is? It's a brilliant idea. A guy came up with an idea, regular guy, from nice, sweet, ambitious balabas from White Plains, New York. Right? You're from White Plains? Okay. Do you know the daily giving guy? No? Okay. So he came up with this idea that instead of people giving, if everybody could just give $1 a day, he can collect so much money from the Jewish world just giving $1 a day, and then he could distribute it to worthy organizations. So, and that way, it's such a great zechus to give $1 a day to tzedakah. There's so many days that you'll go without giving tzedakah at all sometimes. Especially when people don't carry cash anymore. So even when the Mishlachim come to shul, you may, it used to be you would say, I'm sorry, and you were lying. Now you might actually be telling the truth, right? You don't have anything on you. And you don't want to take out your credit card because, you charge $1 on your credit card. A guy that came around the shul complained to me last week. He said, 20 years ago, I came around shuls and they gave me $1. Don't they know about inflation? Why are they giving me $1? They should give me $5. It's a good time. What? I do know. You do know him. There you go. Donut. Yeah. He appreciates the shout outs for daily giving. I don't know if he appreciates the personal shout outs. That's why I kept his name out of it. But okay. So daily giving, it's $1 a day that comes out of your account, right? You don't even realize you're giving it, except that they send you an email each day. Thank you so much for giving $1 today. They give something like $22,000 a day. It's amazing. The guy is giving like $6 million a year. He's like one of the biggest gevirim in terms of deciding where tzedakah money goes. So it's being spread beautifully throughout all these 50 different organizations. So you're really having maximum impact all over the place. Are you exercising your giving muscle? Not really, because it's sort of automatic. It's happening on its own. So he would tell you, yes, you are, because you're getting that email reminding you that you just gave up $1. So maybe you are, but maybe that would be enough kamina. So okay, there are many possibilities over here. But Rav Yosef Engel has a beautiful piece in one of his svarim where he has 26 examples in Lekach Tov Sim Tezvav. Don't worry, we're not going to go for 26 examples of quantity versus quality in mitzvos. He quotes this Rambam, for example, that the Rambam seems to say higher quantity of mitzvos exercises your mitzvah muscle and therefore defeats a higher quality of mitzvah. Giving more money at once is a higher quality. The piece starts with the Ran in the end of Maseches Yoma. The Ran in the end of Maseches Yoma talks about if, let's say, you go to a doctor, a person's sick, and the doctor says, oh boy, you're really sick. What you need to eat is raw meat, let's say. And you say, okay. So you go and you open your fridge looking for raw meat, and you see there's raw meat there, but it's nevela. I don't know what it's doing in your fridge. Okay, but you have nevela in your fridge. And then you're like, oh no, it's only nevela I have in my fridge. It's Shabbos. It's Shabbos. You only have nevela in your fridge. So you're like, oh wait. And you look in your backyard and there's a cow. I forgot about my cow. So what's your second option?
Shech the cow.
You could shech the cow. Now, shechting the cow is chiv skila, malacha d'oraisa. Eating nevela, a lav. So which one do you choose? The lav, obviously, right? Says the Ran, in the name of the Ravid, what if the doctor said, you need to eat 10 kazesim of nevela, 10 kazesim of raw meat? So now, I have 10 kazesim of nevela in my fridge. If I eat 10 kazesim of nevela, how many averos do I get? 10. If I shech the cow, 1. Says the Ravid, shech the cow. Meaning the quality of the Isser is outweighed by the quantity of the other Isurim. That's the starting point of Rav Yosef Engel. And he has so many rayas. He actually, one of the things that he brings up is one of the things we mentioned before about burying Rishaim next to Tzadikim or Rishaim next to each other. He says if a person violates an Isser Kares and an Isser Lav, both an Isser Kares and an Isser Lav, you could bury him next to people who are Chayiv Skila. Because Kares plus the Lav equals Skila. I don't know how you do the math, right? Meaning the whole thing is very difficult to know, like, how much quality is quality, how much quantity is quantity, like, what are the higher mathematics of all this? But that is certainly part of the cheshbon, that even though Shabbos is a more severe Isser, Yom Tov and Yom Tov is a lesser Isser, but if it's much, much more of Yom Tov, then it would seem to be that's problematic. So I could give you another many examples, but I'll close with one more and then we'll wrap it up. The Magen Avraham in Hilchos Shabbos, Reish Tzadi Aleph Sif Aleph, the Sifkat Aleph. The Magen Avraham discusses how many meals a person have to eat on Shabbos. 3 Shabbos meals. Let's say you ate your Friday night meal, you're done, and now Shabbos morning you wake up and you realize that you have enough food for 1 really good meal or 2 very shvacha meals. Which should you choose? So Magen Avraham writes, when you're faced with that choice, better to have 2 proper meals and not have Suda Shlishis, rather than to have shvach meals, rather than to have weak meals, because the quality outweighs the quantity. So the problem with the piece in Lakach is Rav Yosef Engel has 26 examples, 14 of them point to quality, 12 of them point to quantity or something like that, and it doesn't come to any neat resolution. And because it doesn't come to any neat resolution, how would you pass in this case of the resident? Should he switch his shift or should he leave it? I find it very hard to tell someone to switch a shift dafka to work on Shabbos. Meaning, even if he's already working on Yom Tov, that's what he was handed. Someone mentioned this far earlier. But to tell a person to dafka switch a shift where he's then going to work on Shabbos, I find that a very difficult thing to do. I thought that he should leave it be. Question?
You said at the beginning that his family would be mad at him. Will he not factor into this issue at all?
It factors in a little bit, yeah. We skipped that discussion. Afal PK. I thought that he should leave it as is. Okay, I want to wish all of you continued hatzlacha in your learning this year, next year, for many years to come. Great to see all of you.